Welcome back, everyone. There's this common idea, this myth almost, that learning a language has to be, well, hard work, like grinding through textbooks, memorizing endless lists.
Yeah, just tedious drills, right.
Exactly. But today, we're looking at sources that completely flip that idea on its head. They argue that the absolute fastest way to really deep learning, especially for English, might actually be through things you already love. We're talking music, movies, books, the fun stuff.
That's absolutely the core message. Our mission today really is to unpack how these sources treat entertainment not just as, a fun pastime, but as fundamental, powerful language learning tools.
Tools, yeah.
We're digging into the practical, step-by-step advice they offer for hitting fluency in English, and the big idea is substituting that rote memorization with genuine engagement and, well, natural acquisition.
So what we've got here is basically a stack of sources outlining a kind of cognitive shortcut, a way to learn English faster by leaning into content you actually want to engage with day after day.
It's about tapping into how we naturally learn, almost like going back to how you learned your first language, but with intention.
Okay, so let's get into the core philosophy then, because it seems like everything else builds on this one central idea.
It really does. And that idea is enjoyment. Learning has to be a joy, not a burden. The sources are incredibly clear, almost relentless on this point. You absolutely must learn with content you already find enjoyable.
And they're quite specific too, aren't they? It's not just a general have fun. They warn you against forcing it. Like, if you find documentaries boring, trying to learn English from them is probably a bad idea.
Precisely. Or, say, if you can't stand action movies or a certain type of music, using that genre for practice. Well, it's just going to feel like punishment, isn't it? You'll resist it.
Right. And why does this enjoyment factor matter so much? Is it just about feeling good?
Well, feels good, sure, but the sources point to something much more practical: motivation and consistency. If the learning process itself is fun, something you look forward to, you'll naturally want to do it more often.
Which means more exposure.
Exactly. More hours logged, more contact with the language. And that increased exposure, driven by enjoyment, is what directly leads to faster learning. It changes the whole dynamic from I have to study to I get to watch this movie again, or I want to understand this song.
It makes learning almost effortless, or at least less effortful.
Less friction, definitely. You're leveraging existing desires rather than fighting against boredom or resistance.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, alongside enjoyment, the other big pillar the sources build on is repetition. They call it your best friend. We all kind of know repetition helps memory, but what's special about it in this context, tied to enjoyment?
That's a great question. It's not just about hammering the same information into your brain mechanically. The sources suggest that when repetition is tied to enjoyable content, like a favorite movie scene or a song you love, it engages different parts of the brain.
How so?
Well, think about rote memorization, like flashcards. That's often semantic memory, just the fact, the word itself. But repeating something you enjoy, something with context and emotion, taps into episodic memory.
Episodic memory, like remembering an episode from your life.
Exactly. So you don't just remember the word hilariouses, you remember the specific scene in the sitcom, the character's face, the sound of the audience laughing when that word was used. It's embedded in an experience.
So the memory has more hooks, more connection.
Precisely. And that richer, context-laden memory trace is easier to recall and becomes more, well, sticky. It makes the learning deeper and retrieval faster.
Okay, but let's address a potential issue here. Repetition. It can get boring, right? Even with stuff you like. Watching the same 5-minute clip over and over or listening to one song on repeat, doesn't that lead to fatigue? How do the sources suggest we handle that?
That's a really valid point, and the sources are quite practical about it. They don't advocate for, say, watching a 3-hour movie 5 times back-to-back. That would be mind-numbing.
Right.
Instead, they emphasize focused, often shorter, bursts of repetition combined with varied engagement. So maybe you watch one key 5-minute scene multiple times today, really trying to understand every line, maybe even mimicking the actors.
Okay, like microdosing the repetition.
Kind of. Or with a song, maybe just focus on mastering one tricky verse for a day or two, listen to it, sing it, look up the words just for that part. Then maybe tomorrow you focus on the chorus.
So it's about depth in small chunks, not just passively reconsuming the whole thing.
Exactly. Active, focused engagement with smaller pieces beats passive, full replays every time when it comes to beating that fatigue factor. Quality over just quantity of repeats.
That makes repetition sound much more manageable, actually. Targeted practice rather than just hitting play again. Okay, let's shift gears slightly and look at the specific tools, starting with music. The sources seem to love music as a learning tool.
They really do. They talk about it training the ears and, interestingly, the heart connecting emotionally. But practically, it's fantastic for learning new words, getting a feel for rhythm and flow, and definitely for improving pronunciation.
And the key technique they highlight seems to be singing along.
Yes, absolutely. Singing along is described as super practice. And think about why. It's not passive listening anymore. You are actively producing the English sounds yourself.
You're using your mouth, your tongue.
Exactly. Your mouth and tongue muscles are physically learning the shapes and movements needed for English sounds. It helps them literally get used to English pronunciation in a way that just listening can't replicate. You're building muscle memory.
So like practice without realizing you're practicing because you're just, well, singing.
Precisely. It disguises the effort as fun. And the most straightforward tip here for anyone listening is pick songs you genuinely love. If you're obsessed with a song, you'll want to listen to it again and again.
You'll do the repetition naturally without needing a study schedule.
Right. You'll probably sing it in the shower, hum it while you're working. The sources mention this can feel almost like magic. You start absorbing words and phrases without that conscious effort of, I must memorize this vocabulary list.
Yeah, I could see that. I know I've learned phrases from songs without ever trying to.
One of the sources had this great little anecdote. A learner talked about finally understanding the difference between tricky structures like could've, should've, would've, not from a grammar book, but just from singing along repeatedly to some pop song that used them a lot.
They just felt the difference in meaning through the song's story.
Exactly. The context and the repetition made the grammar intuitive. That's the kind of magic they're talking about.
Okay, so music is great for the ears, the mouth muscles, rhythm, and some vocabulary. But what about understanding longer conversations, different accents, slang, the real world stuff?
Yeah.
That seems to lead us to movies and TV series.
Yes, exactly. Movies and series bring what the sources call real English right into your living room. And their value over, say, a textbook dialogue is immense.
What makes it so much richer?
It's all about the layers of context. In a movie or show, you get natural-sounding conversations, not stiff textbook examples. You hear how people actually talk, the slang, the idioms, the incomplete sentences.
You hear different accents too, right?
Well,
Which is important.
yeah, huge. You get exposed to regional variations, different speeds of talking, and crucially, you see the speakers. You see their body language, their facial expressions. So much meaning is conveyed visually, which helps you understand even when you don't catch every single word.
That visual context must fill in a lot of blanks.
Easily 50% of the meaning sometimes, especially with humor or sarcasm. Textbooks just can't capture that richness.
Now, the sources had some interesting tips for beginners using movies. One that surprised me a bit was the recommendation to start with English subtitles on. Why is that?
It seems counterintuitive, maybe, like a crutch. But the logic is about connecting the sound of the language with its written form. When you hear an actor say a word and simultaneously see it spelled correctly on the screen.
You link the sound and the spelling in your brain.
Exactly. It helps you build that bridge. It stops you from having words you only know by ear or only know by sight, which can happen. It synchronizes your auditory and visual understanding of the word.
Okay, so subtitles are good for that initial connection. But then they say you need to take the training wheels off. Right.
Absolutely. That's the critical next step. Once you feel a bit more comfortable, the sources are quite insistent. Turn those English subtitles off.
Why is that leap so important?
Because it forces your listening skills to develop properly. With subtitles on, it's very easy to just end up reading the dialogue instead of truly listening to it.
Your ears get lazy.
They do.
Yeah.
Turning subtitles off forces you to rely solely on your hearing to understand the flow, the rhythm, the pronunciation, the connections between words in rapid speech. It's challenging, but that's where the real listening improvement happens.
And they suggest being active while watching, too, not just passive viewing. This personal acting class idea.
Yeah, I love that description. The idea is don't just sit there, use the pause button. If you hear a line you like, or maybe a phrase you find difficult but want to use,
Pause it.
pause it, rewind a few seconds if needed, listen again, then actually say the line out loud. Try to copy the actor's pronunciation, their intonation, their rhythm, mimic them.
So you're practicing speaking while you're watching.
Exactly. It reinforces the learning and helps you internalize the sound and feel of natural English sentences. And related to pausing, if you hit a word you really don't know and it feels important,
Pause and look it up.
pause, do a quick look-up dictionary app on your phone, whatever, get the meaning, and then press play again. Don't spend ages on it, but don't just let crucial words fly by either.
The emphasis is on active understanding, not just getting through the episode.
Absolutely. Understanding and engagement are far more important than just passively watching the whole thing without really getting it.
Okay, so we've covered music and movies. Now let's talk about the third pillar, books. The quiet teachers, as one source called them, how do they fit in? What unique benefits do they offer compared to audiovisual media?
Books offer something different but equally valuable. They are fantastic for building vocabulary, especially more complex or nuanced words, and they do it by showing words in really rich, detailed context.
More context than a quick movie scene sometimes.
Often, yes. In a book, you might see a word used multiple times across several paragraphs or chapters in slightly different situations. This helps you build a much deeper, more solid understanding of its meaning and usage than maybe a single line of dialogue can provide. Plus, reading forces your brain to do all the work. There are no visual cues.
You have to create the images, the understanding, purely from the text.
Right, which really strengthens your comprehension skills and, as the sources suggest, builds imagination in the new language.
But reading in a new language can be intimidating, picking up a huge novel.
Definitely. And the strategy the sources strongly advise is crucial here. Start simple. Please don't grab War and Peace on day one.
Probably good advice.
Choose materials appropriate for your level. Simple novels, short stories, graded readers designed for learners, even children's books or graphic novels can be fantastic starting points.
Why is starting simple so important?
Because the goal is to understand most of what you're reading. You need to be able to follow the story or the main ideas without constantly hitting frustrating walls of unknown words. If you only understand 30%, you'll likely give up. Aim for, say, 80–90% comprehension initially, keep the frustration low and the enjoyment high.
So manage the difficulty level to stay motivated. And what's the big payoff from consistent reading, according to these sources?
This is maybe the most exciting outcome they describe. Reading helps your brain start to genuinely think in English.
What does that actually mean, thinking in English?
It means reducing or eventually eliminating that intermediate step of translating in your head, where you read an English sentence, mentally translate it to your native language to understand it, then translate your thought back into English to respond or continue.
Yeah, that mental juggling act. It's slow.
Very slow and mentally taxing. Consistent reading, especially of longer texts, helps your brain start making direct connections between English words and the concepts they represent, bypassing your native language. You start to just understand the English directly.
Which makes comprehension and eventually speaking much faster and more natural, like the internal translator gets quieter.
Exactly. It's a huge step towards fluency.
Okay, so for someone wanting to leverage reading, what are the practical tips? How should they approach it?
A few key things. First, maybe have a pen or highlighter handy. If you see a new word that seems important or interesting, underline it.
But don't stop immediately to look it up.
Not necessarily. The first strategy should always be to try and guess the meaning from the context. Look at the words around it, the overall sense of the sentence or paragraph. Treat it like a little puzzle.
Well, I guess first.
Because that act of puzzling it out, of actively engaging with the unknown word using the context, actually helps lodge it in your memory much more effectively than just passively looking up a definition.
Makes sense. Active learning again.
Right. But then, probably the most crucial piece of advice, and the sources really hammer this home. Do not stop every few seconds to look up every single unfamiliar word.
Because that just kills the flow, right?
Completely. It turns reading from an enjoyable dive into a story, into a tedious stop-start vocabulary exercise. You lose the plot, you lose the enjoyment, and you'll probably stop reading altogether.
So what's the rule then? When do you look things up?
If a word keeps appearing and you still don't get it, or if not knowing a specific word really prevents you from understanding the main point of a sentence or paragraph, then okay, maybe pause and look it up quickly. Otherwise, let it go.
Let it go, even if you don't know it.
Yes. Focus on grasping the main idea, the gist of the story. Your brain is incredibly good at filling in blanks over time, especially if you encounter that word again later in a slightly different context. Trust the process of gradual acquisition through repeated exposure. Don't let perfectionism about knowing every word ruin the experience.
That's a big shift in mindset for many learners, I think. Letting go of understanding everything immediately.
It is, but it's essential for making reading sustainable and effective for fluency. Focus on the forest, not every single leaf.
Okay, this brings us to a really critical point that connects all these tools: music, movies, books. The sources insist it's not enough just to passively consume. You have to produce the language. You have to speak.
Absolutely fundamental. All the listening and reading builds your comprehension, your internal knowledge base. But if you want to be fluent, which usually means being able to speak reasonably well, you must practice speaking out loud.
Why is speaking aloud so different from just understanding or reading silently?
It's about building the physical skill, the muscle memory. Your mouth, tongue, vocal cords they need, practice forming the sounds, coordinating the movements required for English. It's like learning a sport or a musical instrument. You can't just learn the theory, you have to physically do it.
So how do we practice speaking using these entertainment sources?
Well, we touched on it with movies, repeating lines aloud, mimicking actors. Same with music. Don't just listen, sing the lyrics out loud, really try to match the singer's pronunciation. With books, even just reading a passage aloud instead of silently in your head is valuable practice.
Seeing the words, feeling them in your mouth.
Yes. Training the mouth, building that physical capability is non-negotiable according to these sources if speaking is your goal.
Now, related to this idea of processing language, there's a major warning the sources give about a common trap learners fall into: overtranslation.
Ah, yes, the constant mental translation. They are very clear that trying to translate everything you hear or read, word for word, into your native language is really detrimental.
Why? We know it's slow, but is there more to it?
There is. The sources suggest it keeps the wrong part of your brain too active. Constantly translating engages your analytical, rule-checking mind. That's useful when you're consciously studying grammar, perhaps.
But not for fluency.
Not for fluency. Fluency requires more intuitive, automatic processing. By constantly translating, you're essentially practicing the skill of translation, not the skill of thinking and reacting directly in English. You're reinforcing the habit you ultimately want to break.
So you're strengthening the detour instead of building the direct highway.
That's a great way to put it. You're actively working against the goal of natural acquisition. The advice is to try, as much as possible, to feel the meaning directly from the English, to get the general idea, the gist, without needing that word-for-word translation step.
One source used a really nice metaphor for this, didn't they? About rain.
Oh, yeah, that was good. It was
Yeah.
like, if you stop to translate every single word in a fast conversation or a story, you completely miss the overall flow, the rhythm, the main message. It's like trying to catch every single raindrop instead of just enjoying the feeling of the rain.
And you just end up feeling overwhelmed and missing the experience.
Exactly. You get bogged down in the tiny details and miss the bigger picture. The sources really emphasize trusting your brain's ability to connect the dots over time with enough exposure. Let the meaning wash over you. Focus on the flow.
That requires a degree of comfort with ambiguity, I suppose. Being okay with not understanding every single drop.
It does. But that comfort grows as your comprehension improves naturally through more immersion.
And beyond single words, something music and movies are brilliant at teaching is expressions, right? Real-life phrases.
Oh, absolutely critical. This is where your English starts to sound less like a textbook and more like, well, real English.
Yeah.
Movies and songs are packed with the idioms, the phrasal verbs, the common expressions that native speakers use constantly.
Things like, what's up? Instead of always, how are you?
Exactly. Or no way when you're surprised, or I'm just kidding, or hang on a second. These little phrases are the glue of natural conversation.
And you often learn them best in context, seeing when and how people use them in a movie scene or a song lyric.
Precisely. Learning them as whole chunks, tied to a situation, makes them much easier to use correctly yourself. It adds color and naturalness to your own speaking.
The sources also mentioned not being afraid to use helper tools, especially early on, like subtitles, which we discussed, and also lyrics.
Yes, they're very positive about these tools, seeing them as scaffolds, not crutches. Subtitles help bridge the listening grading gap initially. And having the printed lyrics to a song you're trying to learn, one source literally called that a treasure map to the language.
A treasure map, I like that. Because it visually lays out the words you're hearing.
Exactly. It gives you the key, lets you see the structure, follow along, identify tricky words. These tools aren't cheating, they're smart accelerators, especially when you're starting out or tackling difficult material.
Okay, so if we try to pull all these threads together, what's the synthesized strategy emerging from these sources?
I think it boils down to a few key principles. First, leverage the power of repetition, but make sure it's enjoyable repetition tied to content you genuinely like.
Prioritize enjoyment to maintain motivation and consistency.
Absolutely. Second, actively use a mix of media music for sound and rhythm, movie series for context and real conversation, books for deeper vocabulary and thinking in English.
And be active, not passive. Pause, repeat, mimic, guess meanings.
Yes, engage actively. Third, train your mouth, not just your ears and eyes. Speak out loud, sing out loud. Build that physical skill.
And finally, try to resist the urge to translate everything. Focus on the flow, the gist, and trust your brain to acquire the language more naturally over time.
That really captures it. It's a strategy based on working with your brain's natural learning processes, using enjoyment as the fuel.
Looking at the sources overall, there's a clear perspective here, isn't there? A belief about the role of entertainment.
There really is. They consistently frame these tools, music, movies, books, not just as incidental fun, but as potential gifts, as powerful resources that can make the often challenging journey of language learning more engaging, more effective, and ultimately more human.
It's a perspective that sees learning embedded in culture and enjoyment, rather than separate from it.
Precisely. Transforming it from a chore into a continuous, enjoyable exploration.
A really empowering way to look at it. It puts a lot of effective tools directly into the hands of the learner, tools they probably already have access to.
And already enjoy using. That's the beauty of it.
Okay, so to wrap up, let's leave our listeners with something practical to consider, building on everything we've discussed.
Right. So if we accept that repetition, especially enjoyable repetition, is a master key to unlocking fluency, here's a thought. What's one specific movie, or maybe a favorite album or song, or even a short book that you've enjoyed sometime in the past? Something you already know you like.
Okay, got one in mind.
Could you maybe revisit it this week?
Mm.
But this time, go back with intention. Don't just passively consume it for the story or the music again. Actively listen for the language.
Looking for things you missed before.
Exactly. Pay attention to those interesting phrases, the way sentences are structured, the specific vocabulary used, maybe things you didn't even notice the first, second, or third time around because you were just caught up in the plot. Can you intentionally mine that familiar, enjoyable content for new linguistic gold?
It's like finding hidden levels in a game you thought you'd already completed.
That's a perfect analogy. Use what you already love as a resource to consciously deepen your understanding and active vocabulary. It's a fantastic way to put these ideas into practice right away.